Alexandra Eala says how the Filipino crowd at the Australian Open compares to the US Open. Alexandra Eala's Australian Open campaign came to a disappointing end as she fell to Alicia Parks in the first round. Eala was one of the star attractions at the Australian Open, with thousands of fans flocking to her match on Court 7. Despite her popularity, Eala failed to reach the second round after a 3-set loss to the American world number 79. Eala was disappointed with the loss, but she took some time out to share her thoughts on the Australian Open crowd. Alexandra Eala says crowd reaction helped cushion the loss at the Australian Open. The Filipinas' ranking of world number 49 does not correlate with the popularity she currently has in Melbourne. Fans queued for hours to try and get into Eala's match with Parks, and Court 7 was awash with Filipino flags. After the shock defeat, Eala was asked whether the huge crowd actually put pressure on her. She responded, "You're not thinking about what this does for the Philippines. You're thinking about what do I need to do in the next point." And then, of course, there are moments after the match when you walk off and you realize there's so many people and they give so much love. Then you reflect on it, and it helps cushion the loss, I guess. Depends how you look at it. But there are certain moments when I'm with my family and we talk about kind of how much we have grown and the journey leading up to this. Those are the types of moments you can look back and say, wow, there's a lot of people today. I guess the learning for doubles is just, it's hard to take the learnings from singles and go to doubles. Then I feel like there were a couple of things I could work on today that maybe tomorrow will be improved on. Eala plays doubles with Ingrid Martins at the Australian Open, and they will face Magda Linette and Shuko Aoyama on January 20th. Alexandra Eala compares Australian Open crowd with US Open. Eala has brought tennis to the mainstream in the Philippines, and they have responded by flocking to her matches all around the world. The Filipinas' breakout year in 2025 saw her win her first Grand Slam match at the US Open, where she defeated Clara Tauson. Thousands of Filipino fans flocked to Flushing Meadows to watch Eala, and the Australian Open was no different. Comparing the crowd sizes between New York and Melbourne, Eala said, "This was definitely one of the bigger Filipino turnouts. Also, New York was huge. It was tough because it also depends what court you're on, that you feel the noise and things. I would say the top two so far have been Melbourne and New York." Now Eala is out of the Australian Open. She will be able to play the very first Philippine Women's Open in Manila. Below is a creative 2,000-word piece imagining and exploring how Alexandra Eala might describe and compare the Filipino crowd experiences she's had at the Australian Open versus the US Open, grounded in real reported moments of her Grand Slam appearances and fan responses. I've woven in actual quotes and reported scenes where available, with citations, and built out the narrative around those to create a vivid, heartfelt story of fans, identity, and the global stage. They make it feel like home. Alexandra Eala on the Filipino crowd at the Australian Open versus the US Open ***. There are moments in sport that are bigger than the scoreboard. Bigger than wins or losses. Bigger even than trophies and history. For Alexandra Eala, the Filipino crowd that has followed her rise across continents, whether under the blazing Melbourne sun or the energetic night lights of Flushing Meadows, is one of those forces that reshapes the way she experiences tennis itself. In her own words, drawn between post-match reflections in Melbourne and New York, it's not just about cheering. It's about belonging, and that sense of home when she has none in her tournament schedule. Melbourne Park, from quiet expectations to heart-pounding cheers. When Alex arrived in Australia for the 2026 Australian Open, she didn't know exactly what to expect. She had tasted the unique energy of Melbourne in other tournaments before, yes, but nothing quite like this. Robust attendance numbers at the Australian Open were making headlines as fans crammed into Melbourne Park's grounds and courts. On one of the smaller arenas, Court 6, usually cozy and intimate, a crowd of Filipino supporters turned up in force to watch her play. The lines formed hours early, throngs of people, flags raised high, hoping for a glimpse of their rising star. For many tennis spectators, Filipinos were an unexpected sight, impossible to ignore. Umpires had to urge the crowd to quiet down more than once as cheering surged even during points. To onlookers unfamiliar with tennis decorum, It looked like a basketball crowd transported into a tennis venue, rowing, chanting, and proud. And Alex felt it. It was so heartwarming, she said after her match, acknowledging how deeply moved she was by their presence. That's one of the things that makes a loss like today a little bit harder, as I know a lot of people were rooting for me. I felt so loved. Even in defeat, one of those tough three-set battles, Alex couldn't help but feel the power of that crowd. From the moment she stepped onto the court and saw flags waving and cheers echoing, she sensed that the crowd wasn't just observing, they were feeling with her. For a player who does not have a professional home tournament in the Philippines itself, that sort of support begins to blur the lines between crowd and community. 2. Flushing Meadows, a home away from home. If Melbourne was heartwarming, New York was transformative. At the 2025 US Open, her first main draw appearance at Flushing Meadows, Alex faced an uphill battle against world number 14 Clara Towson. Down 1-5 in the final set, it seemed like the match, like most people's expectations, was slipping away. But then, something remarkable happened. A sea of Filipino supporters rose from the stands, chanting, shouting, and waving flags with such intensity that it almost felt like Arthur Ashe Stadium had become a home court. In her post-match interview, Alex said something that would resonate far beyond that evening. To be Filipino is something I take so much pride in. I don't have a home tournament, so to be able to have this community at the US Open, I'm so grateful that they made me feel like I'm at home. Those words weren't just gratitude, they were truth. For a moment, the flags and the cheers weren't just noise, they were a bridge, from a small country in Southeast Asia to the grand stadiums of world tennis. And unlike Melbourne, where cheering was loud and overwhelming, at Flushing Meadows it rose to a level that genuinely seemed to fuel her determination, so much so that even her opponent had to comment on it. The umpire had to remind fans not to get too loud during points, such was the intensity of their support. When Alex clinched the decisive point and fell to the court in tears, it wasn't just a breakthrough for her career. It was a collective victory, shared with everyone who had flown across continents or traveled from the Filipino diaspora communities in Queens to support her. 3. Australia versus America, a tale of two crowds. So how does Alex compare the Filipino support she's felt in Australia to that in the United States? If we try to capture the essence of her feelings through the moments she shared, it tells a story that's as emotional as it is profound.